First Samuel, First Samuel chapter 18.
Your love for your love for me.
First Samuel chapter 18. We're going to illuminate for our understanding tonight verses 1 through 5. First Samuel 18, verses 1 through 5. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as he loved himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. Whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. You may be seated. 1 Samuel 18, verse number 1. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved David just like he loved himself. I want to preach for a little while tonight using as a subject, stick with me. Stick with me. Look at the person beside you and tell them this is not the time to leave me. Look him in the eye and tell him I need you to stick with me right now. Amen. Stick with me. Ladies and gentlemen, almost living in anonymity is a scientist by the name of Art Fry, who found himself in frustration while singing in the choir. He would mark pages in the hymnal with small little bits of paper. And when it was time for the choir to sing, he would rise in unison with the rest of the choristers, only to be dismayed and frustrated because the bit of paper that he had hidden in the hymnal had inadvertently fallen to the floor. Suddenly an idea struck him. Put adhesive on a small piece of paper and use it as a bookmark. And since it's there, you can use that same sheet of paper to take notes during the sermon. It'll stay in its place and it won't cause any damage to the page. Ladies and gentlemen, it became so successful that he took it back to where he worked. A small company you might have heard of called 3M. And he introduced an office product called Post-its. Post-its was birthed out of a frustrated choir member who couldn't find the right hymn. Reverend Clemens, I wish was a simple way to get people to stick with you when you can't find your place. But it seems as though we're living in an hour and in a season that when it's time for you to take a stand, people keep falling away. People are now more driven to have conversation, and out of that conversation, they think that that warrants calling each other friends. We're living in an hour, an era, and in a time where people have relationships birthed out of convenience. I'm with you as long as you can help me, or as long as you are on the rise. I am afraid, Pastor Moore, that we no longer have real, authentic relationships that are birthed out of covenant. The covenant seems to be a hard commodity to find. To be in covenant means that you are permanently identified, not for the season, not for the moment, not during promotion, but permanently identified. Covenant, ladies and gentlemen, means maintaining total loyalty, even when you've been opposed. Having covenant means I'm counting the cost of our relationship and I'll pay it. Because some of you need to acknowledge tonight, to be your friend is expensive. It costs a lot to hang out with you. Because I know you're not going to admit it, but it takes a whole lot of work to deal with somebody like you who sometimes doesn't feel like being bothered. Some days you don't feel like talking. Some days you want to be by yourself. I know you're not going to be honest. It takes a whole lot of work to be your friend when you have unannounced mood swings. When there's some days you want to stay up at night and talk, and then other days when the phone rings you get offended. It takes a whole lot to be your friend. And when we slide into our text, ladies and gentlemen, the Bible declares that Jonathan loved David. And here it is, where it is that we have a problem where many of you are finding unhealthy relationships, is notice how he loved David. He loved David like he loved himself. See, the problem is, and I hope I can go out on a limb, you keep falling in love with people who don't love themselves. And you keep trying to figure out why they can't love you. And they can't love you because they never learned how to love themselves. So they become angry with how it is that you have a standard of how you treat yourself. And because you won't allow people to treat you any kind of way and talk to you any kind of way and disrespect you at any leisure, they get offended because they're used to not maintaining themselves. See, anybody who's gonna be able to love you has got to start at the level you love